Please be seated.
Government Bills and Orders for second reading. Bill 35, All-Season Resorts Act. Debate adjourned. Honourable Mr. Amory speaking.
The Honourable Deputy Government House Leader has 14 minutes remaining should he choose to use it.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to request the unanimous consent of the Assembly to move to 1-minute bills for the remainder of the evening sitting.
Out of an abundance of caution and clarity, on occasion, the Deputy Government House Leader or the Government House Leader will also request for a 1-minute bell upon entry into Committee of the Whole. Not suggesting that that's what you want to do, but if you get to committee and then you request it, it doesn't work that way. So do you just for the remainder of the evening, or do you want to include Committee of the Whole?
Requested for the evening, including the Committee of the Whole.
Honourable members, having heard the motion as proposed by the Honourable Deputy Government House Leader with assist from the Speaker by the looks of things, I will ask only one question. Is there anyone opposed to the request for unanimous consent? If so, indicate now. Unanimous consent is granted. The Honourable Government House Leader still has 13 minutes remaining should he choose to use it. Are there others wishing to join in the debate? The Honourable Member for Banff, Kananaskis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak to Bill 35, the All-Season Resorts Act. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I know it's our first evening session, or my first evening session anyways. Yeah, here all week. So I want to start, Mr. Speaker, by saying that I am, as the MLA for Banff Kananaskis, obviously supportive of a strong tourism industry and strong tourism development. I strongly believe in the jobs that are provided by the tourism sector across the province, and I see a lot of potential for growth in this sector, and that excites me. People often think tourism is related to low-paying jobs, Mr. Speaker, and often what I say to them is that I'm pretty sure the CEO of Brewster makes a lot more than me. Tourism encompasses all levels of jobs across multiple disciplines. It is a massive economic opportunity. All-season resorts legislation is something the tourism industry has been asking for, and it will provide consistency and predictability for the sector, which is always good. Tourism growth is important, and tourism can provide unique experiences across Alberta to celebrate our beautiful province. I will emphasize, however, that this must be done strategically in collaboration with municipalities, stakeholders, residents, and businesses. And in that vein, I have very big concerns with this bill the way it is currently drafted. The bill puts far too much power in the Minister of Tourism's office, which I find problematic, Mr. Speaker, because managing public lands is complex and important to be thoughtful in. The Minister establishes the principles for the identification of public land designation for all-season resorts, as described in the bill. However, it is not clear in the bill who will be consulted, what principles will apply, and who will help define these principles of land that will define an All-Season Resorts Act. So when we read the bill, it is not clear to me where All-Season Resorts Act will apply. Where will these resorts be built in Alberta? What will be the characteristics of those lands? And one thing I think we've learned really heavily in the last couple of years, Mr. Speaker, is that Albertans care a lot about public lands. The Defend Alberta Parks campaign, the response to coal development on the eastern slopes, I think it is safe to say that Albertans are paying attention when it comes to public lands management, and that they have no qualms in sharing their concerns with this government, or with any government, quite loudly. Albertans want to know that developmental activities on Crown land are appropriate and fit within what they envision Crown land being good for. Albertans also want to know that municipalities and municipal districts are directly engaged in that decision-making. And I think the other thing we've seen through the Defend Alberta Parks campaign, for example, is that if people feel that their parks and protected areas are being threatened, they will fight those developments coming forward. And so I'm a little bit concerned that this act needs to, but doesn't ensure that protection of Crown land. And that
Order. Honourable members, I know we've just returned back to the Assembly from dinner. If you'd like to consider continue some of those dinner conversations privately, I encourage you to do so in either of the lounges, the South Member Lounge. There's many places for you to do that. I appreciate that the Honourable Member for Banff-Kananaskis is the only one with the call, though.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It would be a real shame if the members opposite missed out on all the genius that I'm spewing forth at the moment. So the other part of this bill that is problematic is that it moves the management of public lands as defined in these all-season resorts into the Minister of Tourism's hands, whoever happens to be the minister in charge of tourism. This has never been done before. Public lands is managed in this case right now by the Minister of Forestry and Parks and the Minister of Environment and Protected Areas. In past cabinets, it's been managed by the Minister of Environment and Parks or the Sustainable Resource Development, depending on how far back you want to go. My point, though, Mr. Speaker, is that no minister in charge of tourism has managed public lands. And so the expertise to manage public lands is in the public service under different ministries. And I will say, after being a land use planner myself in the public service, that the management of public lands is incredibly complex and requires expertise. And the reason why this is so complex is because there's a lot of things happening on Crown lands at any given moment. There's large industrial practices like forestry and oil and gas, maybe even coal. There's also communities, grazing leaseholders, and of course recreation and trails. This complicated land management requires somebody with the expertise to manage it. Moving all-season resorts public lands under the Minister of Tourism, I think, is particularly risky for public lands management. I also get concerned that these public lands will slowly over time become private, without legislatively becoming private, but just in who manages them and how they are managed. And this raises questions around, will Albertans still have access to these public lands once they become an all-seasons resort? I question clauses section 6(3) and 4, which basically says that parks and protected area boundaries under the Provincial Parks Act and the Wilderness Areas, Ecological Reserves and Natural Areas Act, which I will just call WERNA from now on, that section 6(3) says no boundaries will be changed, no protected area boundaries will be changed for an all-season resort, but then section 4 says, well, unless we change the boundaries of parks and protected areas. So it's interesting to me because the process to change the boundaries of parks and protected areas is already defined in the Provincial Parks Act and in WERNA. And so it's weird to me that this clause would even be in this bill at all. I am not clear of the intent behind that, but it does stick out to me as potentially creating a conversation where protected area boundaries can be changed to accommodate an all-season resort. Massively concerning, Mr. Speaker. And as I have mentioned before, Albertans really seem to care about provincial park boundaries and their legislative protections. And if the Minister of Tourism and Sport doesn't believe me or thinks I might be exaggerating, perhaps he'd like to consult his colleague, who was the former Ministry of Environment and Protected Areas, and ask him how people reacted when there was 165 parks on the chopping block. There's also amendments and connections to the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act in this bill, and this is where I find particular challenge, Mr. Speaker. The Environmental Protections and Enhancement Act does a lot of things, but mostly it governs the environmental impact assessment process. This applies to all kinds of developments and land use developments for everything. The regulations associated with EPEA, the Environmental Protections and Enhancement Act, define mandatory activities and exempted activities. Mandatory activities include things like forestry, quarries, dams, coal mining. These are activities that automatically require an environmental impact assessment. From the tourism perspective, facilities or developments that attract more than 250,000 visitors per year and are immediately adjacent to a protected area defined in WERNA automatically trigger an environmental impact assessment. That will still hold true, Mr. Speaker, but my question is what about the developments that don't meet that incredibly high threshold? So developments that have less than 250,000 visitors a year or are adjacent to a provincial park, not a protected area defined in WERNA, will an impact assessment be triggered for those areas? And the simple answer is that will be up to the Minister of Tourism and Sport. Well, it doesn't really make sense to me because the Minister of Tourism and Sport and the public service working under tourism has no expertise in understanding what the environmental impacts of a particular development may be. As I mentioned before, public lands and environmental impact assessments are managed by the Ministry of Environment and Protected Areas and Forestry and Parks. Yet, these developments could be approved without involvement from those ministries. This is hugely problematic, Mr. Speaker. This Act also exempts all-season resorts, regardless of if they trigger an environmental impact assessment or not. It exempts them from going to the Natural Resource Conservation Board, and that is also problematic. The NRCB is the body responsible for public interest reviews of major natural resource projects. Unlike the members opposite, I happen to think that Alberta's landscapes are our greatest natural resource, Mr. Speaker, and requiring all-season resorts to conduct an environmental impact assessment is critical to the success not only of the resort, but to the protection of the beautiful wild lands that people come from across the world to appreciate. There is no other development that is decided by the tourism minister on public lands. And so we have to ask ourselves, what does the minister or the ministry, the public service in tourism sport, know about the ecological function of these spaces when that expertise exists in other places in the public service? How can we have confidence that our public lands will be protected? Similarly, all-season resorts will not have to follow standard land use planning processes defined in the Alberta Land Stewardship Act, the regional plans that come after them, or underneath them, and the cumulative effects associated with that. It seems a little unjust, Mr. Speaker, that all other developments need to consider ALSA, regional plans, and cumulative effects, but all-season resorts do not. And I'll just be clear, Mr. Speaker, all-season resorts will contribute to cumulative effects on Crown lands. That is the nature of cumulative effects. Indigenous consultation is not even mentioned in this bill, and that's also incredibly egregious. I know some of my colleagues will speak to some of the concerns that we have about Indigenous consultation and how this bill may affect access to treaty lands to practice treaty rights. So overall, Mr. Speaker, I love tourism and I love all the jobs that it brings, but we need to do this right. We need to be strategic, and we need to make sure that by planning tourism, we are not damaging the very place that people come to love. Thank you.
Are there others wishing to join in the debate? The honourable member for Calgary, Glenmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do appreciate the opportunity to speak on Bill 35, the All-Season Resort Act, and I want to thank the member of Banff-Kananaskis for the passion she brings and the genius she brings into the House too, so thank you. This bill creates an all-season resort regulator to approve and oversee applications for the creation of all-season resorts on Crown land in Alberta. That's public land, Mr. Speaker. Of course, we value and support tourism growth, and we equally value the sustainability of our environment for Albertans to enjoy, as well as for our children and our grandchildren to enjoy in the future. This act, as is now, does not allow for judicial review when the minister or someone acting for the minister has made decisions on all season resorts. This legislation must respect provincial parks, wilderness areas, ecological reserves, natural areas, and heritage rangeland. The Alberta Wilderness Association says 30% of Alberta's land and water must be conserved to protect ecosystems, and right now only 15% is being conserved. It's worth noting that Alberta has over 90 species at risk list. That is troubling, Mr. Speaker. We need to understand the full impact of new development and the environmental implications of all season resorts, Mr. Speaker. Growing the tourism industry cannot happen without growing the tourism workforce. I looked through the Minister of Tourism's report. He shares the government's goal of growing the province's visitor economy to $25 billion by 2035. And I do like a clear goal, Mr. Speaker. I think it's exciting that there's an ambition to grow the sector. At the same time, with the government's goal of $25 billion by 2035, we also need to increase the tourism workforce by 100,000 employees. And we need to acknowledge that many workers in that sector are often in low-paying service jobs and struggle to find affordable places to live in expensive tourism communities. Jasper, Banff, and Canmore are all struggling to provide sufficient housing options for tourism workers. And I'm grateful for the member of Banff-Kananaskis who's always a passionate advocate for her constituents in these communities. She often shares the concerns of her constituents on housing and affordability, which is a true crisis that Albertans are living in right now. So the government needs to seriously take the developments needed to support tourism growth, which extends far beyond the all-season resorts. There needs to be affordable housing for employees. There needs to be accessible healthcare options to support the workforce, especially those doing labor jobs. There needs to be effective and supportive immigration policies. There needs to be career pathways and training offered to grow interest in the tourism sector as well. So the government needs to bring on a systems approach to this plan, especially if it plans to grow the tourism industry in this manner and by 2035. We need to remember that creating an all-season resort will have impacts on local towns, villages, and municipalities. And we know the UCP government hasn't really demonstrated that they are a good partner with municipalities, and the Act does not require the minister to work with the municipalities who will be closely impacted by a resort. So how does the minister justify this choice? Does the government not think that the municipalities should be part of this conversation, especially considering the infrastructure that will be required to support these resorts? I cannot help but ask, Mr. Speaker, if the UCP government is serious about tourism, why are they championing coal mining in the beautiful Eastern Slopes? The Eastern Slopes is one of the most beautiful areas in the province. My family and I enjoy going there as we travel different parts of our beautiful province. And many of our family and friends like fishing there. So water is important over there. Some things are too precious, Mr. Speaker. The drinking water downstream is too precious. Maintaining the fragile ecosystems on the Eastern Slopes is too precious. We love being local tourists, and we are not alone. Nearly half of international visitors go to the Rockies, and 83% of international visitors are in Calgary, Edmonton, or the Rockies, Mr. Speaker. That's according to the Alberta Tourism Industry Association. And it is important to remember that the 2021 Joint Review Panel consisting of the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency and the Alberta Energy Regulator rejected the Grassy Mountain Coal Project, not just because it would harm species at risk, but because the mine, and I quote here, is misleading in the context of understanding the project's economic effects. So why is the UCP government misleading the public on the economic benefits of the project? The Joint Review Panel confirms that Grassy Mountain coal has physical quality problems that cannot be fixed, and quote, below that of coal products of the Elk Valley in British Columbia and of Bowen Basin in Queensland, Australia. And the panel states, that report states, and I quote here, the socioeconomic impact assessment did not include the reliability of its project benefit estimates and had insufficient details about the method used. So why is the Premier and the government ignoring both? The project's poor quality, poor coal quality, and the company's flawed economic assessment that will impact tourism in the area. Let's not forget the Energy Minister told us that selenium is fine for mammals. And let's not forget the Environment Minister isn't working on the environment. So if these ministers could look at what's happening in the Elk Valley in BC and the impact of selenium on water and tourism in that area, they would also know the impact on tourism and on the land in the eastern slopes. The report completed by an independent consulting firm, Burgess Environmental, calculates at least $6.4 billion to reverse the rising selenium concentration in Canadian and United States waterways due to toxic runoff from BC's Elk Valley coal mines. The Joint Review Panel report also warns, and I quote here, there is a risk that both the recreational and tourism sectors could experience a reduction of activities, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the physical low quality of coal in the eastern slope and its impact on the precious and fragile ecosystems and the tourism industry in that area in the eastern slopes should close the debate here. There's neither economics, nor tourism industry, nor environmental arguments here. So why isn't the Minister and the Premier focused on developing a recreation and tourism economy in the eastern slope instead of a project that will ruin the pristine viewscapes of the eastern slopes? Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member from Banff-Kananaskis would tell you, coal and tourism do not go well together. The Grassy Mountain mine is located 7 kilometers from the Crow's Nest Pass. You can see the mine from the top of the local ski hill. The Crow's Nest Pass is one of 10 zones seen as places for strong tourism development as per the government's list. The coal transfer station will be in the village of Blairmore, meaning there will be coal dust in town and visible from everywhere someone might recreate and enjoy the area. People will be breathing it in. It's toxic, it causes cancer and respiratory issues. Imagine all the visitors in the area breathing the toxic matter while mountain biking and hiking in those beautiful areas in our province. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, we need to grow the tourism industry in Alberta. It is an exciting industry, and we have had a tradition of welcoming travelers from Canada and abroad to share the beauty of our province. We are deeply committed to growing tourism in a way that is sustainable and in a way that protects our environment, so that 7 generations from now, Albertans and visitors can still enjoy snow-covered mountains and tree-filled forests. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are there others wishing to join the debate? The honourable member for Edmonton North West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words in second reading to Bill 35, the All Seasons Resort Act. And, you know, in some ways I'm quite interested in this because, of course, here in Alberta, with our very large population increase and so forth, we quite literally need more of everything. And that includes recreation opportunities for our population, affordable recreation opportunities, and to build up the tourism industry here in the province of Alberta. And when we're doing that, we have to be conscious of, number one, that the main tourist market that we're aiming for is Albertans, right? Yeah. People need recreation here in the province. They need something that's affordable, that's accessible, and that you know, they can bring their families to and make memories to last a lifetime. And so, you know, for such a long time, camping was as part of that mix, and to have an affordable place to camp in the summer, have a tent, and some place you can drive, you know, from your home, not too far, and not too expensive, right? And so on that basis, right, we have to make sure all of our decisions are based on that sense of accessibility for Albertans and affordability for Albertans too. And so we need to build more of different types of recreation opportunities, and all-season resorts are definitely one of them. And we know that there's pressures on existing resorts here in Alberta, and we can expand on those existing resorts to accommodate for volume as well. We know that the Balboa Valley is very congested, especially in the summer. You have to get in line basically to go to Lake Minnewanka or up to Lake Louise and so forth. There's traffic jams all summer long. The inflation rate on a hotel stay in those months as well is quite dramatic too. And so, you know, so that we can build capacity that's affordable and accessible, and have the infrastructure that can support these things too, are all very important parts of responsible tourism development. And, you know, I've met with the mayors of Canmore and Banff, and along, of course, Calgary too. I mean, this is a major tourism corridor up through the Balboa Valley, and I don't have the numbers handy, but they're literally accommodating the needs of people 20 or 30 times the residential population of the Bow Valley, you know, in the summer, with, you know, everything from water to sewage to food and you know, petrol, gasoline, beds, tenting, camping spaces, you name it, right? And so if we are developing more all-season resort capacity, we need to make sure that we're supporting those municipalities that supply those services. And then, on top of that, of course, having accommodation that can accommodate the workers that are there. Right now, it's just so unaffordable for people working in the entertainment and tourism industry to live in the Bow Valley, you know, and the whole thing just becomes unsustainable. So I'm looking for more detail here. I mean, I like the idea all seasons resorts, building more capacity. It has some favor, definitely, but we have to make sure that we are doing the responsible thing. And so I do have some questions around that. You know, the concept generally is good, but we need to be more specific. I mean, we have some examples of, I think, some fairly responsible development, like a place like the Kananaskis resort area, right, was developed. It's probably been there for 40 years or more, right? And even more. And we saw, especially the new owners, I was quite impressed in how they chose to fix up the existing structure and to build out that all-season potential there. And you know, I did work with them when I was Minister of Culture and Tourism for 1 year, and helping to restore the damage, for example, at the golf course, okay, which I found a little bit hard, but I mean, they made the case, and I understood, right, that was part of the all-season attraction for the rehabilitation of the Kananaskis Resort, and I do understand the utility of that. And same with the neighboring Nakiska, right? Nakiska, again, built for the Olympics, you know, an underutilized ski and all-season sort of area, not just for skiing, but of course summer and shoulder season use. And I can see the utility of, of rehabilitating that too, quite frankly. It's so close to Calgary. It has a little bit more variable snow cover at different seasons of the year, but, that can be mitigated. And so I guess my question, though, is we have individual targets for all-season development. I mean, another place I'm thinking is maybe like the Castle ski area or Fortress, right? These are all places that are already there, and so that's fine. And you can build out from that, and then perhaps build responsible, sustainable tourism based on that. But I mean, so we have individual targets that we can aim for, but I'm just wondering why, or what's the utility of having categorical changes to the law that would regulate and to ensure environmental standards and consultation with First Nations and measuring the water intake, the roads, everything that goes into building an all-season resort. Why can't we just do that on an individual basis? Because I mean that's what is generally done, and I think investors will to think about building more all-season places because they know that there's a market there, and they know that there's more people around, and so we make the provincial regulation of these things transparent and straightforward, and but we do it on an individual project basis. We don't need to do it categorically because there's individual idiosyncrasies between building up, let's say, Castle as opposed to Nikiska, or building out some of these other places, Fortress, as opposed to maybe another Kananaskis resort. I mean, these are individual things and individual circumstances with unique geography that needs to be looked at individually. So, I mean, that's one of my questions, certainly, around this Bill 35. And other principles that we have to, I think, ensure is that there is accessibility at all points. This is Crown land, right, which is part of the province of Alberta, that Albertans own together, collectively, as a province. And so I don't want to see at any turn development that is so exclusive that it excludes the vast majority of Albertans based on price points. Like if we put a big fence around a chunk of the Rockies and charge a very large sum of money to stay there for the night, then most people won't be able to do that. And that idea that it is Crown land, public land for the public, is compromised somehow. So at any point along the way, if we're developing something, it doesn't have to be the Taj Mahal of Rocky Mountain resorts. It can be something that reflects who we are as regular working people that look after each other and go camping in the mountains, and away you go. I mean, that's what I've done since I was a kid, and that's what I did with my kids, and now that's what they're doing with their grandkids, my grandkids. And so, on it goes, and I like to see that continuity. And when you do go to a place like the Rockies and you can point up to those children or your spouse or your grandkids and say, yeah, this is ours. We have this together as part of the heritage that we pass on to each generation. And so I think when we're developing all-season resorts or whatever we're developing here in the province of Alberta, generally, but specifically to recreation, that it should follow those principles as well. And so with that, I would like to cede my time. Thanks.
Honourable members, are there others wishing to join in the debate this evening? Seeing and hearing none, I am prepared to call on the minister to close debate. Honourable members, having heard the question for second reading of Bill 35, All Season Resort Act, all those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. In my opinion, the ayes have it. That motion is carried and so ordered.
Bill 35, All Season Resorts Act, is now read a second time. For second reading, Bill 31, Justice Statutes Amendment Act 2024. Adjourned debate. Honourable Mr. Williams.
Are there others wishing to join in the debate for Bill 31, Justice Statutes Amendment Act? The Honourable Member for Calgary Varsity has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on Bill 31, the Justice Statutes Amendment Act of 2024. There is really no way that I can support this bill because it includes clauses that make it, to me, really say the let's try gerrymandering bill. Every Albertan deserves the chance to have their vote count. And population growth does mean that we need to add new ridings. That's so that we are not going further in diluting the votes in any one areas of high population growth, or increasing the geographic size of some of our very large ridings. We do need to address this need. However, we need to assure that we do this with a fair process by developing new ridings that still allow individuals' votes to count. We need the new electoral boundaries to respect existing community boundaries, such as keeping within Calgary and Edmonton and other municipalities, so that they're not being blended with other groups that have different areas of interest. We need to do this whenever possible, and we need to not change the rules around an electoral boundary commission so that they can disregard these guidelines and just do willy-nilly whatever they choose. Those who live in cities and smaller municipalities do have different interests and needs than those who live in rural areas, and who live in different municipalities. Their needs are different than perhaps their larger neighbors. People choose to live in these areas for many reasons. We all deserve to have the option of electing an MLA who will represent us, a representative who will represent the community, and try to keep our communities as similar as possible so that those needs can be met. We all need a representative who will speak to our needs, someone who understands us. This Act removes the requirement to consider existing city and municipal boundaries. For some reason, roads that are there that divide certain groups also don't need to be considered. Removing the requirement to consider municipal and city boundaries opens the door to gerrymandering, and thus my consideration of this as the Let's Try Gerrymandering bill. The Commission can make decisions around new ridings by ignoring principles that Albertans care about. We believe that we need to be protected from political interference. This bill says that, as the minister pointed out in media interviews, this makes the decision-making more flexible. Well, flexible means they can do what they want willy-nilly. And of course, there are members of both of the parties involved in this, but there's a majority by the ruling UCP, and so, of course, any considerations brought up by the minority will easily be ignored, and so we do not have freedom from meddling by politicians in keeping our democracy intact. The Commission certainly can do what they want without considering democracy. I really cannot support this undemocratic bill. What else is important in the Let's Try Gerrymandering bill? It just doesn't solve so many of the real problems faced by Albertans. We all know that healthcare workers need protection, but this bill feels falls very short of any meaningful reform. Albertans now face a healthcare system in crisis, and the UCP are putting forth changes that don't address the core issues. Healthcare facilities need more than just protection. They need staff and resources. And in this bill, we see that the UCP want more power to collect data. But they have a history of withholding critical public health and safety information from Albertans. Any new data collection powers must come with very strong transparency requirements and regular public reporting. I'll give the example of EMS data. We recognize that one of the very first things that this government, under its new leader, proposed to do was to get paramedics quickly out of the emergency department. They demonstrated the time that paramedics are held in the emergency department waiting until their patients were transferred to the care of emergency department staff. And indeed, this was very long and was a big problem. But rather than solve the problem, as they say they did, they changed the definition of how long paramedics would be in the emergency department, such that the start time from when the clock started to collect the time in the emergency department moved from when they arrive to when the patient is triaged. And for patients being brought in with non-urgent conditions, but where they couldn't stay in their home, they could be there for hours waiting before the patient is actively triaged. So of course the numbers look better, but we have no idea of what is actually happening as far as whether there is any real movement on getting our paramedics back on the streets. We also have been seeing across the province closures of emergency departments and urgent care centres. But where are we seeing that data appropriately and timely reported? It's reported as one-ofs, but needs to be reported in terms of data and numbers. We also do not have any access as Albertans to accurate health workforce data. All we hear is numbers of physicians or numbers of nurse practitioners that are registered and have the capability of seeing a patient. But the government has access to tremendous amount of data as to what the actual activities are of the physicians and the nurse practitioners. Are they even seeing any patients? Are they even working within the area of primary care when we're talking about primary care physicians? We hear about numbers of physicians that are being recruited and then learn that that includes everyone that's even having a conversation about recruitment, even though in current times the majority are going to other places. We are not getting accurate information on workforce. We're really getting information that could not be further from the truth. So let's talk a bit about why it is so important that we stand up to the fact that this bill enables gerrymandering. So what is gerrymandering? It is changing the boundaries of a riding so that voters are either concentrated instead of spread out naturally, or they are diluted so that they are going to be overwhelmed by a different majority. And it's picking the boundaries so that the intent of the election will happen rather than letting the electorate elect who they want to represent them. The issues that we're really facing here are really down to the issues around democracy. We are moving in a direction with this bill to allow the Electoral Commission to decide where the new ridings will be by ignoring rules that we can use that will help guide decisions so that they are done without political interference. Now, why would this be? Well, of course, if the decision-making is going to be in the hands of the party that wants to stay in power, then, hey, wouldn't it be a good idea to concentrate the people that want to vote for that other party all in one area so that there's no chance that an adjacent area perhaps might elect the other party. So how are we going to stop this? The first thing is to vote against this bill. The second is to make very clear to Albertans that we're at high risk of this happening. We need Albertans to understand what gerrymandering is. We need them to speak up and say what their feelings are about this within the ridings that they live. Because many of us know in our own area what might change that would make it better or worse for a party in power making the decisions around the boundaries to maintain power. So I urge everyone here to vote against this bill, vote against one more move towards populist ideology where a majority can completely override the needs of minorities in all areas, and we need to stand up for this. So I'm going to turn the floor over to my colleagues, many who also have very strong views on this bill, and will talk about varying aspects of it, including the gerrymandering problem, the issue around data, the issue around the protections around the health system and the legal system, and I hope that you will all think about very closely about where we're moving as far as democracy goes if we are to support this bill. Thank you.
Are there others wishing to join in the debate? I see the honourable member for Edmonton City Centre rising.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate the opportunity to rise and speak to Bill 31, the Justice Statutes Amendment Act 2024. So as my colleague from Calgary Varsity was just discussing, one of the prominent aspects of this bill is I would say, significant change to the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act. Now, Mr. Speaker, the setting of the boundaries for our constituencies, the expansion of those, these go to the heart of what democracy is about. Ultimately, this is about representation. Alberta's right to have fair representation here in the legislature. And indeed, that goes right to the heart of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The right for effective representation is guaranteed by that charter. And we recognize that there can be significant impact about how these boundaries are drawn as to what the outcomes of individual elections might be. That is something without question. So that is why the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act is written in the way it was, to remove as much as possible any opportunity for bias, any opportunity for government to put their thumb on the scale, to ensure that that necessary process of assessing as the population of our province grows, how we should be redrawing our boundaries to best preserve representation and also ensure fairness in our elections. So it is significant that this government is choosing, on the eve of the next Electoral Boundaries Commission, to make some significant changes in what the Act prescribes for how that process should take place. So what we are seeing here, Mr. Speaker, is the government is changing language. They are changing the recommendations, well, actually, not even recommendations. They are taking what is in fact prescription and changing it to recommendation. So what we have in the original version of the Act is there are a number of factors which it says the Commission shall take into consideration. And they are moving the majority of those, Mr. Speaker, to may take into consideration. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but certainly anyone who is a lawyer, like say the Minister of Justice who is bringing forward this bill, certainly knows it is significant difference between the words may and shall when we are dealing with legislation. May is a requirement. Shall is a suggestion. And the minister says, in fact, what's that? Oh, pardon me, yes, may is a suggestion, shall is a requirement. I was distracted as the minister said that's exactly what he wanted to do. So the minister is being quite transparent, Mr. Speaker. He intended to make sure that this commission did not have to consider the factors that have been considered in every other single boundary commission up until this date. The minister intended to weaken this legislation, as he just declared across the floor. So let's be clear, Mr. Speaker. The factors that the minister just said he intended to weaken are factors such as consideration of the sparsity and density of the population, the common community interests and community organizations, including those of Indian reserves and Métis settlements, wherever possible, the existing community boundaries within the cities of Edmonton and Calgary, wherever possible, the existing municipal boundaries. The minister intentionally is weakening those portions. Now, I will say, Mr. Speaker, the minister has not provided very clear reasons why. Some vague suggestions. But certainly, Mr. Speaker, you know, some members have used the term gerrymandering. This certainly does seem to be approaching that direction. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, cities have very different considerations from the communities that surround them. People make very deliberate choices on which side of that line they choose to live, Mr. Speaker, and they do so for very specific reasons. The needs and the concerns of somebody who lives in Edmonton-Ellerslie are materially different in many respects than somebody who chooses to live in Leduc. They may have some things in common. They may have some particular concerns. They may have some values. But the fact is, Mr. Speaker, there are significant differences with what the concerns are going to be for someone who's living on the Edmonton side of that line, who is dealing with Edmonton infrastructure, who deals with the Edmonton Police Service. The decisions that are made then that encompass the city of Edmonton and therefore encompass that community in Ellerslie versus the decisions that will be made for the city of Leduc, where they have the RCMP or where they have other municipal infrastructure considerations. The only reason, Mr. Speaker, for this government to be looking at blurring these lines and doing so intentionally, as the minister just reminded us he did, is because they are seeking some form of electoral advantage. And that is concerning, Mr. Speaker, but it is par for the course with this government. Let us not forget. At various points, this Premier, this government, have willingly and intentionally attempted to interfere in systems, to tilt the scale against the better interests of Albertans for their own political gain. Let us not forget, this is the Premier who was found by the Ethics Commissioner to have contravened the Conflicts of Interest Act in her interactions with the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General in relation to the criminal charges of one Mr. Arthur Pawlowski. So that situation, Mr. Speaker, was beyond the pale. Let's be absolutely clear. A Premier attempting to influence the outcome of a criminal case. That is the same Premier now whose Minister of Justice is bringing forward this bill with these significant amendments to one of the most significant things when it comes to our elections, how those boundaries are drawn, how Albertans are divided, and where Albertans get to cast their vote, and what weight that vote will carry. So this is not idle speculation, Mr. Speaker. This is a government which has already demonstrated a willingness to break the systems of our democracy, to push past boundaries and engage in inappropriate behavior for its own political advantage. So there is no reason, Mr. Speaker, that I should give them the benefit of the doubt in the changes they want to make in this bill. We've seen it time and again, Mr. Speaker, when this government puts together a committee, more often than not, they're not putting together a committee because they're actually interested in getting a balanced outcome. We just look at the 2019 Supervised Consumption Services Review Committee that was put together by Premier Kenney, which was heavily biased from the outset and put out a report so embarrassing that it's been roundly criticized by anyone with any level of actual expertise. Because again, the government had predetermined what outcome they wanted to have so they could go ahead with the actions they wanted to take. And Mr. Speaker, let me be clear, that's been at the cost of actual lives. That is the record of this government that now wants us to believe that they are innocently weakening the requirements and considerations for how electoral boundaries are drawn in this province. We saw this government repeat that behavior again with their committee so-called investigation of safe supply. A committee that was so embarrassingly biased that we as opposition could not even bring ourselves to participate in it. Loaded with people who had already declared their opposition to any consideration of any aspect of the thing they were supposedly going to be studying. And again, put out a report so heavily biased and so embarrassingly bad, it too has been roundly criticized by multiple academic and actual experts in the field. Which one was that? Oh, yes. There's the government that, of course, also set up their Albertan Activities Committee under Mr. Steve Allen, more millions of public dollars. But in that case, Mr. Allen couldn't even bring himself to actually go so far as to endorse what the government has actually tried to get him to endorse. He had to conclude that there actually hadn't been any illegal activity at all. One of those rare occasions, Mr. Speaker. So what we have here again now is a government that is taking what have been the requirements for every boundary commission up until today. Let's be clear on that, Mr. Speaker. Every single boundary commission, every report, every decision that has set the rules for every election that's been conducted since the implementation of this act. The Minister of Justice told us tonight he intentionally is weakening those requirements. He wants to ensure that the committee is not bound by those considerations. They may consider, Mr. Speaker, if they feel like it, if it's Tuesday and it's raining. I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, this government is far more prescriptive of what they will let parents choose in terms of medical treatment for their children in consultation with their doctor than they are willing to be with the committee that's going to decide on our electoral boundaries. They will actually go so far as to interfere with the individual rights of Albertans, again, something that a Minister of Justice, Mr. Speaker, should be protecting, but is not. He's more interested in undermining the Electoral Boundaries Commission in their study, in their rules, than he is in protecting those individual rights of parents to make their own decision for their children in consultation with medical expertise. Because again, Mr. Speaker, this is a government that has repeatedly demonstrated that they will act in their own self-interest, that they will bend the rule of law to do so. They will change the law to do so, as we've seen them repeatedly do. Government that felt it wasn't good enough that they could stop in and visit a skybox, they had to sit there for the whole game. So they changed the law in Alberta to accommodate that. Because this is a government that considers the law to be something that is there for their convenience. It is merely an obstacle to them getting what they want. And they're willing to use the power of this House, and government MLAs are willing to sit and vote in support of that. So again, Mr. Speaker, we owe this government no benefit of the doubt in the changes they are making here, because they have repeatedly shown us what their character, their morals, their principles are. And they are far from being above question. Now, Mr. Speaker, they may think that it's okay. You know, they can do this, they can get away with it because the average Albertan has a lot on their plate, and that's true, they do, Mr. Speaker, particularly under this government, which continues to have the highest inflation rate in Canada, which continues to have one of the highest rates of unemployment, which continues to cost Albertans more in almost every aspect of their life. So thanks to the inaction of this government, thanks to how they have undermined and fractured our healthcare system, how they have pushed our education system to the brink, how even now individuals who are the victims of crime can no longer actually count on having services available in their community. Yeah, Albertans do have a lot on their minds. So they may not be paying attention to what this government is choosing to do through Bill 31. In undermining these principles, intentionally weakening the considerations that go into how these boundaries are drawn in the hopes, Mr. Speaker, of partisan gain. That's not something to be proud of, Mr. Speaker. That is something for which this government should be ashamed.
Are there others wishing to join in the debate this evening? The Minister of Education, the Honourable Member for Calgary, Falconridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand before you today to discuss a critical piece of legislation.
Honourable Member, can you just pull your reading device back a little? I think it may be covering the microphone and creating a bit of feedback there. Let's try again. The Honourable Member for Calgary, Falconridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand before you today to discuss a critical piece of legislation. Bill 31, the Justice Statutes Amendment Act 2024. This bill seeks to amend 4 distinct acts, but I want to focus particularly on the changes proposed to the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act. This legislation directly impacts how electoral boundaries are drawn across our province, a matter that touches the very core of democratic fairness and representation. Bill 31, as introduced by our Minister of Justice, raises the number of electoral divisions in Alberta from 87 to 89 in response to significant population growth. This in itself is a necessary step for fair representation. However, upon a closer look, the proposed amendments also include troubling changes to Section 14 of the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act. This section dictates the factors the Commission must take into consideration when drawing boundaries for Alberta's provincial ridings. The current legislation mandates that the Commission shall consider a variety of essential factors such as geographical features, the communities of interest, and importantly, the existing municipal and community boundaries. While under Bill 31, however, these considerations will shift from being mandatory requirements that the Commission must adhere to optional factors that the Commission may consider. To many, this shift represents a relaxing of the rules that ensure fair and effective representation. The impact of this change is profound, especially in the context of Alberta's diverse and rapidly growing population. These changes undermine a critical part of democratic fairness and fair representation for all. And Mr. Speaker, to fully understand the impact of these changes, we must first consider the purpose of electoral boundaries adjustments. Well, in Alberta, electoral boundaries must be redrawn every 8 to 10 years to reflect shifts in population and demographics. The last significant adjustment was made in 2017. Alberta has seen explosive growth in certain areas since then, particularly in urban centers like Calgary and Edmonton, some mid-sized cities, Airdrie, Red Deer, even some in rural. However, this growth has not been uniform across the province. Some ridings, especially those in rural and northern areas, have been stagnant or even declining populations, some of the rural ridings. This population imbalance means that some ridings are significantly overpopulated, while others remain underpopulated. And Alberta's legislation requires that no riding may exceed a 25% population deviation from the provincial average. Currently, 9 ridings exceed this threshold, mostly in urban areas. The upcoming mandated boundary review aims to address these discrepancies and create a map that reflects the current population distribution across the province. However, this process must be conducted fairly and transparently to ensure that no community is disenfranchised or unfairly represented. The challenge is to ensure that urban and rural ridings alike maintain their voice in the legislature. Communities that have grown rapidly, such as those in Calgary's northeast quadrant, must not be diluted or marginalized in the process of redrawing boundaries. The balance between urban and rural interests must be respected, and communities must retain the ability to advocate for their needs. In this light, the changes proposed in Bill 31, which remove the requirement to prioritize municipal boundaries, could have far-reaching consequences. We cannot allow political favoritism to distort this process. The creation of electoral boundaries should be based on fairness and representation. That is why we must ensure that any changes made to the electoral system will not disadvantage any group or community. And Mr. Speaker, while some aspects of the bill are uncontroversial, the changes to the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act are troubling and could lead to less effective representation, particularly for marginalized and underrepresented communities. It is for these reasons that we, as the official opposition, strongly oppose these amendments. I want to reiterate the fundamental principle at stake here. We cannot be flexible with fair representation. The key issue with the bill is the shift in language from shall to may in section 14, which outlines the factors the Commission must consider when drawing new boundaries. The Commission would now have the flexibility to choose which factors to consider, rather than being required to take them all into account. This includes the removal of requirements to consider municipal boundaries and communities of interest, issues that are critical for ensuring that communities remain united and properly represented. And Mr. Speaker, while the Minister of Justice claims that these changes will provide the Commission with more flexibility to adapt to the realities of Alberta's growth, we must ask, flexibility for whom? Certainly, for the provincial government, this may mean the ability to draw boundaries that suit their political interests. But for the people of Alberta, particularly those in rapidly growing and diverse areas, this could be a disaster. One of the most pressing concerns is the potential impact of these changes on urban ridings, especially those in Calgary's northeast quadrant, like the riding of Calgary-Falcon Ridge, where I have the honor of serving. Calgary's northeast quadrant has been among the fastest growing regions in the province. Over the past decade, communities like Falcon Ridge, Homestead, Turdale have seen an influx of families and individuals seeking better opportunities. The residents here represent a mix of economic backgrounds, ethnicities, and cultures. The makeup of these communities means that they have unique needs and priorities, needs that are very different from those of other parts of the city and province. By eliminating the mandatory consideration of existing municipal and community boundaries, the government risks erasing the collective voice of these communities, separating them into separate electoral divisions or combining them with neighborhoods that do not share their values could dilute their ability to advocate for themselves. For communities already grappling with issues like affordability, access to health care, and educational support, this would be a devastating blow. And Mr. Speaker, let us look at the potential consequences of these changes on Calgary-Falcon Ridge and the broader northeast quadrant of Calgary, yes. This is a vibrant and rapidly developing area. It is home to a growing population, including many newcomers to Canada, students, seniors, and multi-generational working families. The changes proposed in Bill 31, which remove the requirement to consider geographical features, specifically removing the item existing road systems, could make it even harder for constituents to navigate and advocate and for us to serve them. In Calgary-Falconridge, many of our seniors and students rely on public transportation. If boundaries are drawn arbitrarily, without considering the existing road systems and transit routes, these individuals may find it even harder to navigate the system. Public transit, which is already a lifeline for many in our area, could become even more inaccessible, further isolating vulnerable populations. And, Mr. Speaker, for an example, the experience of crossing Provincial Highway number 2, which runs through Calgary's northeast quadrant and ridings such as Calgary Northeast and Calgary Klein, this major artery, a key transportation route for many, divides the city and presents significant challenges for people who live on either side. Creating boundaries that ignore the geographical challenges of the area could leave constituents on one side of the highway feeling disconnected from their elected representatives, making it harder for them to voice their concerns and access services. And Mr. Speaker, our Justice Minister comments about creating more flexible boundaries disregard these realities. When he recently said a CTV news article, considerations for existing boundaries within Edmonton and Calgary, where possible, as well as other existing municipal boundaries, where possible, would be removed. He is downplaying the importance of respecting the lived realities of the communities. Communities like those in Calgary, Falconridge, rely on united, understandable boundaries to navigate the system and make their voices heard. Splitting these communities apart could make it even harder for residents to advocate for their needs, particularly as we face challenges like inadequate healthcare services, underfunded schools, and the lingering effects of the devastating hailstorms that have hit the area in recent years. The changes proposed in Bill 31, particularly those to the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act, threaten to undermine the very foundation of our democratic system. And Mr. Speaker, by removing mandatory considerations like municipal boundaries and existing community lines, this government is opening the door to meaningless, politically motivated boundary changes that could leave large segments of the population voiceless. Mr. Speaker, for communities like Calgary-Falconridge and the broader northeast quadrant of Calgary, these changes are not just imaginary. They represent a direct threat to our ability to advocate for the issues that matter most to our residents. We must stand firm in defending fair and effective representation for all Albertans, regardless of where they live, how they vote, or who they are. Mr. Speaker, we must remember, we cannot afford to be flexible with fair representation.
Are there others? The Honourable Member for Calgary, Acadia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With gratitude, I rise to speak against Bill 31, Justice Statutes Amendment Act 2024. And I want to start by sharing a little bit about myself. From prior debates, you might know that I really enjoy data. I like to collect it, I like to compare it, I like to put it in pie charts, graphics, scatter plots, all of those things. I love it. I love data because when it's collected appropriately, it can provide a piece of the puzzle. Whatever it is I'm trying to figure out, it can provide me an unbiased, when completed correctly, answer, or at least contribute to the answer. Now, of course, data doesn't typically provide a yes or no answer. It is interpreted through context and so many other factors. Now, data has always served me well, which is why I go to it now to provide some insight into this proposed bill and why I'm not supporting it. Let's start by talking about Alberta's population growth. Alberta continues to attract people from across the world, which isn't a surprise to any of us, as we know how great Alberta is.
Yep.
It is, of course, our home. And I think it's fair to say that members on both sides of this House want Alberta to be the best it can be. Now, where we might differ is for whom we want Alberta to be best for. This might differ between the two sides. If we look at the bills that have been brought forward by this UCP government, they are not going to provide any immediate relief to soaring insurance rates, the lack of affordable housing, the splintered healthcare system, and I could go on. Nothing, Mr. Speaker, for Albertans. Nothing. Now, Bill 31 amendment does address some real needs. The electoral boundaries have not been adjusted since 2018. And of course, the goal of providing equal representation for every Albertan in this legislature is the goal of the Boundary Commission. And there are several ridings, 9 I believe, where the population captured in the current boundaries exceeds more than 25% the average number. Now, Mr. Speaker, that could be thousands upon thousands of Albertans. So this clearly demonstrates a need for the boundaries to be revised. But what it doesn't demonstrate is, and I quote, "The proposed amendments would also update and clarify the list of factors that the Electoral Boundaries Commission can consider when making their recommendations," end quote. I am quoting from the member from Calgary Cross from the other day in debate, and the change that is being referred to here, Mr. Speaker, is the removal of the word "shall," meaning it will happen, a note that is prescriptive, to the word "may," meaning it'll maybe happen, and now is full of subjectivity. This is, of course, the same concern that has been brought up by the member from Edmonton City Centre only moments ago. When we're looking at something as important as the boundaries for Albertan representation, I would expect there to be firm goals with reasonable discussion between all members of the committee, and that the solution that is brought forward for consideration would have followed prescriptive guidelines and be evidence-based. But then again, Mr. Speaker, I really like data, and I really trust data. So when I speak to the subjective nature of the situation that Albertans are being put in because of this proposed amendment, it corrupts the data. It dilutes it with subjective thoughts and feelings. And as much as I absolutely value everyone's thoughts and feelings, that is not how we make decisions, Mr. Speaker. More from the member at Calgary Cross, and I quote, "A few minor changes would update the language to reflect the current realities of Albertan communities. For example, updates would replace the reference to existing road systems with a broader reference to the ability and means of broader communication and transportation between various parts of Alberta." Now, this is an interesting change, Mr. Speaker. It is incredibly general and not particularly informative, but it does sound like the government is wanting to increase freedoms, we'll say, to move outside of those existing road systems. So what does that mean? And how will it serve Albertans? Because, Mr. Speaker, that is truly the question. So instead of following roads and natural dividing lines to keep a riding together, it seems that an option to split ridings, and I quote, "the availability of means of communication and transportation," end quote. Now, thinking back to the purpose of the boundary review, is it not to ensure that all Albertans have appropriate representation here in this House? By splitting the ridings, we split the member, thereby making it more difficult for constituents to reach their MLA or for their MLA to reach constituents. And is that not the opposite of the goal? If this is about Albertans and them having representation, this piece seems awfully contrary then, Mr. Speaker. Or is it just that we on this side of the House actually speak with our constituents? want to provide them supports where they are, and will actually take the opportunity to meet them where they are, even if that's on their doorstep. Another part of this amendment speaks to justice. More from the member from Calgary Cross. And I quote, "Mr. Speaker, I think we can all agree that Albertans have the right to know what's going on in their neighbourhoods and in their communities, and this legislation ensures that Alberta's government can get the crime-related data that it needs to keep Albertans informed about what is happening in their communities." End quote. So the proposed bill asks that government departments, municipalities, and police services provide information to the government when asked. Okay, Mr. Speaker, is there a problem here? Like, has the government tried speaking with these folks? Maybe actually have a sit-down conversation, pick up the phone? It seems pretty extreme to put it into legislation to make people talk to you, Mr. Speaker. The member from Calgary Cross also shared that there was a need for, and I quote, accurate data. Again, does the government have problems obtaining accurate data now? It's confusing, really, how, in one case, the government demands data to be available, as with this bill, but with another, Bill 34, it limits access to information for everyone, well, except the government itself. And we have spoken a lot about self-serving bills from last session and from this. This government is pushing through not only bills that only serve themselves, and maybe some of their friends, but they certainly don't serve Albertans, and Albertans continue to struggle. It's winter, Mr. Speaker, and the number of warm-up shelters and housing units are not enough to support the high number of Albertans who will be seeking them out tonight. 1 in 5 Albertan children live in poverty, Mr. Speaker. Child poverty is measured by looking at the employment and stability of the parents or guardians. This data clearly shows that the measures being brought forward by this UCP government are insufficient. What it tells us, Mr. Speaker, is that after 5 years under the UCP government, Albertan children are suffering more than Alberta has seen in decades. This tells us that Albertans don't want bills focused on what is increasing the power of the government. Albertans are looking for legislation that helps support them. No one asked for this UCP government to push our public healthcare system to its breaking point and then snap it into two while fighting with labor groups and healthcare workers. It really does sound like a typical page from this UCP's government's playbook. First, starve the system, pick on the workers, shred the contracts, fire the board, replace with a friend or two, and repeat. Mr. Speaker, this is not what I hear from Albertans. This is not what Albertans are sending to the government when they copy us on it. This is not what we're hearing. I hear that this UCP government continues to pull power inwards and put up barriers to transparency. Mr. Speaker, I was hearing these concerns before the set of bills from this fall. So what happened to transparency, Mr. Speaker? What happened to representing Albertans? Mr. Speaker, I really value transparency. And from what I hear, Albertans do too. So give us the information. Let us learn. Let us be able to actually engage in conversation. It would be the responsible thing to do, and it would be the accountable thing to do. Now, even if people aren't quite as excited about data as I am, I feel this are over here, I feel that Albertans need to be provided the necessary information to make informed choices. Now, let's just chat about some other bills that Albertans have not asked for, Mr. Speaker. Bills 26, 27, and 29, the anti-person bills, where the UCP government decided that they knew better than physicians, better than parents. Goodness, it was only last week that this UCP government voted against an amendment to provide options for parents.
Yep.
And what about Bill 32? So Albertans are suffering from some of...
As noted, the Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
Speaker, I rise on Standing Order 23B. The member has spent a significant amount of time talking about every bill except the one before this Assembly today. I'm not sure if the member is aware, but we are debating Bill 31, and I'd love for the conversation to take place on that bill.
The Honourable Deputy Opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't believe this is a point of order. As you've said in the past, Mr. Speaker, you allow a great degree of latitude when we are engaged in debate. The member clearly referenced the bill, has spoken to it at many points in her debate, and is currently engaged in a bit of contrast on a number of the issues, the manner in which the government is addressing them, and how that contrasts with Bill 31. I think if the member is allowed to continue debate, she will certainly be bringing it back to the topic at hand, hopefully to the satisfaction of the Minister of Justice.
The honourable member doesn't need to raise to the level of debate to the satisfaction of the Minister of Justice, although she does need to meet the standard that the Speaker sets. And I will just say this, that the honourable member did catch my attention when she said, let's talk about a whole bunch of other bills. She proceeded to then talk about other bills, not the bill that we are debating. And so I will hope that she heeds your advice in bringing the debate back to the bill before us.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You're doing great.
So, Bill 31. The bill that tries to do so much and fails so poorly.
Yep.
And I am happy to see the government acknowledge a need to support Alberta's legal system. But instead of investing to fully fund the system, or to address the struggling legal aid system for which so many Albertans rely on, we have what's present in Bill 31.
Yep.
I was also delighted to hear that this government is acknowledging the unsafe work environments inside healthcare. And yet, we're not seeing investment in providing safe staffing ratios or providing opportunity for mentorship or career growth that would also be top of the list for healthcare workers and those they serve. But we see nothing to that effect in this bill, Mr. Speaker. So here's the trouble. The UCP government apparently does not understand that when they talk about protecting healthcare workers from unsafe environment, we are talking about healthcare, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.
So here's the trouble. The UCP government acknowledged there needs to be work, but instead of working towards completing the work, they continue to propose self-serving bills like Bill 31.
You're here.
I encourage everyone in this House to vote against it. Thank you.
Are there others wishing to join in the debate? Oh, seeing the Honourable Minister of Municipal Affairs.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I've listened with some interest. In fact, I listened with great interest. I just didn't hear a lot about Bill 31 in the last few debates. But each of the members across touched on it for a little bit, so I'll try to address that in Bill 31. Well, first of all, the phrase gerrymandering was tossed around a little bit, and I would imagine some of the 12 people watching at home may not be familiar with that term. So it's a term that comes from, I think it was a senator, last name was Jerry, Senator Jerry in Massachusetts, I don't know, 100 and some years ago, that was in charge of Electrical Boundaries Commission. And that's Mr. Jerry, or Governor Jerry, I suppose, was set the boundaries, most people would say, for his own advantage. So typically when boundaries are set, not exclusively because geography and all that can affect it, it's oftentimes in a circle or a square and kind of some type of a block or a blob or something that kind of holds together. Senator Jerry's map looked like a salamander. up and down and around, apparently including the places where he was best known and people most likely to vote for that particular governor. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? Senator Jerry won that election. Governor Jerry won that election. And people started to say, well, that's a funny looking electoral map. I wonder why he did that. So some of them did the work, and I heard some talk about data here earlier tonight, and they looked at data and said, wow, that's where in the previous elections Governor Mander got all the support, and the parts that were left out between the salamander's legs, if you will, to extend that's the areas that didn't vote for the person. So that's where the source of the term gerrymandering comes from. Now, some people in this room probably knew that, Mr. Speaker, but I'm kind of a geek sometimes, and sometimes I look this stuff up. When I hear a word I don't know, I Google it. And if you Google gerrymandering, you will find out just what I said here. Now, Mr. Speaker, we heard a little bit about data. And listening to data, I heard a couple members back talking about how 9 of the ridings, or it's a problem because 9 of the ridings are not within the 25% population base. So that apparently is, according to the other side, an example of gerrymandering. And I heard other people talking about how it's a problem when a major road runs through a riding. I know in my riding, Deerfoot Trail runs through the middle of it, half on one side, half on the other. According to the folks across, that's kind of an example of gerrymandering. And I know there's probably a bunch more, but I'm a member from Pagan. Deerfoot Trail also runs through that member's riding, another example of gerrymandering. So here's at least 11 examples cited by the folks on the other side of gerrymandering. So, Mr. Speaker, something terrible is going on around here. Whoever set these boundaries was gerrymandering and baking things for their own benefit. But wait a minute, that was in 2018. Who did that, Mr. Speaker? The good folks across the aisle. So by their own admittance, while they were talking here tonight, they give examples of what they called bad behavior and doing things to stack the deck in your favor, and who the author of all those things was the NDP when they were in government, Mr. Speaker. So I don't know, when they talk about when they say that in one breath, and then the next breath say, I'm not sure who you should trust. I think they might be referring to themselves, Mr. Speaker, because they repeatedly gave examples of things that aren't right now, all things that the NDP government put in place. So, Mr. Speaker, for those listening at home, well, the folks are twisting themselves into knots, talking about everything except Bill 31. During the few seconds that they did talk about Bill 31, they actually accused themselves of bad behavior. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm a little more generous than the folks across the aisle, so I won't quite accuse themselves of that, but I will point out the irony that the multiple examples of bad behavior complained about by the funds across were the ones authored by the folks across the NDP. All the things the NDP complained about were the things that the NDP actually did. So, Mr. Speaker, it's a little rich after that to complain about folks on this side of the aisle when their own behavior has apparently disgusted them beyond belief. So, Mr. Speaker, perhaps our plan to have a couple members from this side of the aisle, an equal number of members from the other side of the aisle, and an independent person leading the committee sounds like a pretty good place to land, wouldn't you think? Rather than whatever those folks did. So, Mr. Speaker, I think on par, I think I'm going to support Bill 31, and I think maybe even the folks over there should do so too.
Are there others? Seeing and hearing none, I am prepared to call on the Minister of Justice to close debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise and speak. Bill 31, the Justice Statutes Amendment Act 2024. I want to thank all of the people who weighed in on this in this assembly, of course, and in particular my colleague, the Minister of Municipal Affairs, for his insight and his well-reasoned comments, Mr. Speaker. Now, you wouldn't know it if you listened to the member from Calgary, Acadia. But if passed, this bill would make multiple changes to the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act, the Public's Right to Know Act, the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act, and the Alberta Evidence Act. Nothing to do with health, nothing to do with whatever that member spoke about at great lengths. Amendments in this bill would help with much needed updates to legislation to address the current needs of Albertans, increasing access to justice, of course, securing crime data to assist with decision making, and increasing transparency and clarity. Mr. Speaker, this has been a great topic of debate, so I'll begin by talking about the important changes proposed to the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act. As all members in this Assembly know, Alberta's population is rising at an incredibly fast pace, and it is a requirement that every 8 to 10 years, the Electoral Boundaries Commission review the state of boundaries in this province. A fair distribution of electoral divisions is essential to the democratic process. Under the Act, the general rule is that the population of each division in Alberta must be no more than 25% above or 25% below the average population of all proposed electoral divisions. Currently, with more and more people coming into this province, the populations of 9 divisions in Alberta are greater than 25% of the average. So, Mr. Speaker, it's absolutely necessary to update Alberta's electoral map to reflect the current demographic realities of our province. Now, the NDP spoke in great detail about who's asking for this, who wants this, Mr. Speaker. Well, the fact is that Albertans want this. Albertans need this, Mr. Speaker, and it's absolutely essential that we do this. Now, let me also be clear, Mr. Speaker, because the NDP has raised a number of, again, misinformed comments earlier today. The government does not draw the electoral boundaries. It's done through a regular and legislative process. They already know that. An independent commission is established to review the existing boundaries and make proposals to this Assembly about area, boundaries, and names of the electoral divisions. Amendments in Bill 31 would direct the Commission to add 2 new divisions to this province as part of its review of Alberta's electoral map. This means Alberta would now have 89 electoral divisions. To ensure the new boundaries are in place before the next election, the next Commission could be appointed as soon as possible and up to October 31st, 2026 at the latest. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to point out that effective representation involves more than just ensuring fair distribution of population. It involves more than the conspiracies and the theories that the NDP made up in their portion of the debate, most of whom have no clue, Mr. Speaker, what they're talking about. Bill 31 would provide some major updates to the factors that the Commission can consider. Now, the member for Edmonton City Centre stood up and made countless statements that lack any actual knowledge of what this bill and these amendments are actually trying to achieve. Mr. Speaker, the statements made in the debate, especially on the side of the opposition, were inaccurate, and the speakers who rose from the opposition side couldn't be further from accurate. The amendments would give the Commission added flexibility. If you want to get up, you can get up. Please stand up then.
Through the chair.
Order, order. I encourage the Honourable Minister of Justice to speak through the chair. The Honourable Minister of Justice will also know that he's closing debate, which prevents interventions or any other member from rising.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and that member certainly would have been entitled to speak up should she have wished to do so. The amendments would give the Commission added flexibility to ensure that the electoral map is reflective of Alberta's current landscape. Mr. Speaker, flexibility because Alberta is evolving. It is growing. Alberta is becoming more connected in exceptional ways. Connecting Albertans through these amendments is part of why this government supports this bill. The NDP members would know that if they thought that Alberta consisted of more than just Calgary and Edmonton. Alberta consists of small, mid-sized, and rural areas all across this province. Mr. Speaker, but the information and the amendments that we propose in this particular bill don't come from what we developed within this government alone. We looked at other jurisdictions as well. We received advice from the Supreme Court. We received advice from courts across Canada who have interpreted the constitutional right for all Canadians to effective representation. We looked at other jurisdictions in the country and adopted the wording that they use as well, because we know that this language is effective and it works well in other jurisdictions, and we do not restrict our Boundary Commission into strict and difficult to work with parameters. Rather, they should be able to use the tools that are used everywhere else in this country to reflect the best boundaries absolutely possible for Albertans, and this is an independent process, Mr. Speaker. I am excited about the amendments being put forward in this bill, Mr. Speaker. There are a number of other ones that are contained within this bill that amend a number of other existing pieces of legislation in this province, all of which are going to make Alberta a better place. It contains important amendments. Bill 31 in total, in its entirety, contains important amendments that would ensure our legislation is up to date and reflective of what the current realities are in this province. I wish to close debate by encouraging all members to support the amendments in Bill 31. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, the Honourable the Minister of Justice and the Keeper of the Great Seal of Alberta has closed debate on second reading of Bill 31, the Justice Statutes Amendment Act. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. In my opinion, the ayes have it. That motion is carried and so ordered, and a division has been called. Call in the members. Order, order, order. Honourable members, a division has been called on second reading of Bill 31, the Justice Statutes Amendment Act. All those in favour of the motion, please rise. Just about.
Honourable Mr. Guthrie, Honourable Mr. Nicolaides, Honourable Ms. Schultz, Honourable Mr. Williams, Honourable Mr. Blufish, Honourable Minister LaGrange, Honourable Mr. Horner, Honourable Mr. Scow, Honourable Mr. Ellis, Honourable Mr. Amory, Honourable Mr. Newdorf, Honourable Mr. Lowen, Honourable Mr. Wilson, Honourable Mr. Jean, Honourable Mr. Dreeshen, Honourable Mr. Nixon, Mr. Long, Mr. Rosewell, Honourable Mr. Turton, Honourable Mr. Yassine, Honourable Mr. McIver, Honourable Ms. Furr, Honourable Mrs. Sani, Mr. Getson, Honourable Mr. Sigurdsson, Honourable Mr. Nally, Honourable Mr. Hunter, Mr. Yao, Mr. Wright, Mr. Van Dyken, Ms. Pitt, Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Sear, Mr. Lunty, Mr. Wiebe, Mr. Boychenko, Mr. McDougall, Mrs. Petrovic, Mr. Stefan, Mr. Dick, Honourable Ms. Armstrong-Hominick, Ms. de Jong, Mr. Sinclair, Mr. Bouchard, Mr. Singh, Ms. Lovely.
All those opposed to the motion for second reading, please rise.
Ms. Algenaid, Honourable Member Hoffman, Honourable Mr. Egan, Member El Maliki, Mr. Shepherd, Ms. Wright, Member Kayande, Member Batten, Member Irwin, Member Boparai, Mr. Diol, Member Loyola, Dr. Metz.
Mr. Speaker, total for the motion 46, total against 12.
Motion is carried and so ordered.
Bill 31, Justice Statutes Amendment Act 2024 is now read a second time. For second reading, Bill 33, Protection of Privacy Act. Debate adjourned. Mr. Haji speaking. Debate adjourned on amendment.
What is this, RA1?
Question?
I'm just providing an opportunity if members have other meetings or places to be as opposed to interrupting the next speaker. I wanted to provide some opportunity for members to leave the chamber. Honourable members, before the Assembly is Amendment HA1. The Honourable Member for Edmonton Decorah has 8 minutes remaining. Are there others? The Honourable Member for Edmonton Beverly Clairview has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to stand and speak a wee bit about my support for the amendment having to do with Bill 33, the Protection of Privacy Act. The Hoist Amendment that asks that it be not now read a second time, but that it be read a second time in 6 months. So there are a few reasons, Mr. Speaker, why I am absolutely in favour of this amendment and why I think it is incumbent upon this Assembly to take that time to review this particular bill. One of the reasons, of course, is that although it does purport to protect and safeguard Albertans' privacy, in my view, it does nothing of the sort. It becomes clear that this legislation falls short of its stated objectives because instead of fortifying those privacy protections, instead what happens is that it introduces loopholes, delays, and a whole lot of ambiguity that I believe will undermine the trust that Albertans place in their government to protect their personal information. And Mr. Speaker, Albertans deserve much more than a half measure where their privacy is concerned. They deserve transparency, they deserve accountability, they deserve rigorous safeguards where that personal information is at stake. And because of all these gaps, of course, I am supportive of the amendment. One of those reasons why I'm very supportive of the amendment, one of the gaps that I see is that issue of mandatory breach notifications. It's anything but mandatory, unfortunately. It is indeed, I believe, one of the bill's glaring deficiencies. And although the minister has stated that Albertans will be informed if their personal information is compromised, the facts really do speak to something different. Section 10, sub 2 stipulates that breach notifications will only occur if a reasonable person determines that there is a real risk of significant harm. Unfortunately, the idea of someone being reasonable in this instance is just a wee bit subjective speculative and a wee bit vague, because what it effectively does, Madam Speaker, is it gives public bodies broad discretion to decide whether or not to notify individuals. And this is not, contrary to what the minister contends, mandatory breach notification. I'll say the word again, mandatory. It isn't mandatory, it becomes conditional, it becomes opaque, and it becomes concerning. And of course, the subjectivity of it is absolutely alarming. If I'm that person, I'm the head of a public body, and I'm trying to figure out whether or not something I might do, something I might agree to, something I might think might need to be released, might harm someone else, I indeed could be making an error in judgment. Even if most of the time that judgment is sound, once in a while I'm probably going to make a mistake just because of the law of averages. And that mistake, Madam Speaker, could cause someone irreparable harm. I think about the history that I have with kids in care as a teacher and how easy it is to inadvertently or even just haphazardly give someone information that they are not in fact entitled to. This, unfortunately, could land that child or the guardians of the child or the parents of the child in the middle of a situation they could not at all foresee, all because I thought I was doing something reasonable. But the problem isn't necessarily that I'm not reasonable. The problem is that we don't have an agreed upon definition of what reasonable really means. Regardless of all of that, mandatory breach disclosure should be just that. It should be mandatory. That means it should be happening each and every time. One of the other reasons why I am in favor of my colleague's Hoist Amendment, Madam Speaker, is that in this world where automated decision-making systems are increasingly used, Albertans need protections against algorithmic biases and errors. And yet, as the Privacy Commissioner has pointed out, this particular bill doesn't provide any of that. Additionally, the provision which allows government bodies to disclose minors' information under the justification of best interest, just like that word reasonable, lacks clear definition or safeguards. This, Madam Speaker, is a reckless approach, and just like with that word reasonable, it could indeed have far-reaching and damaging consequences for the privacy of Alberta's youth. And I am wondering why. Is this related to recent changes that might be happening in healthcare? Is this related to addictions in mental health? Is this related to provisions for youth in care? Again, there's simply too much subjectivity, not enough of a safeguard, not enough of a clear definition that people can be acting on. Who exactly will be the person or department involved in making the decision that says the release of a minor's personal and private information is indeed in the best interest of that minor? And again, Madam Speaker, I can think of a number of instances where sensitive information could end up inadvertently in someone else's hands who should not have it. And given the way in which our healthcare system is veering into a publicly funded yet privately delivered system, there are indeed grave concerns. I'd urge the minister, all ministers, all of the folks opposite to take another long look into Section 13(1)(EE). While all Albertans deserve to trust in how this government is protecting their information, where the issue of minors, where the issue of our kids is concerned, where the protection of their information is concerned, we can't just hang on what we think a definition of something is. We need to be absolutely categorically sure, and this bill does not allow for that. Another reason, Mr. Speaker, why I am in favor of the amendment which my colleague put forth before us the other day, there is indeed another critical flaw. It's that absence of paramountcy, the absence of a paramountcy provision. Such a clause would ensure that Bill 33 supersedes other legislation, preventing conflicting laws from eroding privacy protections. But without it, this government, this USP government, could introduce bills permitting the collection and use of personal data without being bound by any of those safeguards. And I'm wondering how then we can actually claim, as I've heard folks do, that this legislation is the strongest in Canada when, if this is the case, it will lack this fundamental mechanism to make its provisions enforceable across all, not just some, but all government programs. And certainly that was one of the concerns of the Information and Privacy Commissioner in her letter to the Minister, which was dated just 2 short weeks ago on November 20th. The Commissioner noted a number of concerns with the lack of that paramountcy provision. While the ministry, according to the excerpt included in the letter, notes that it was determined that an express paramountcy provision was no longer necessary, as there should not ever be a conflict between the proposed act and another act. Well, I'm wondering, Mr. Speaker, if there was a lack of understanding as to the precautionary principle, or as my mother used to describe it, catastrophizing, in an effort to understand that exceptions happen. Things that you can't anticipate happen, and you need to be prepared for those things. And you also need to be prepared for the consequences of those things happening. And this is where the lack of this sort of provision in the bill is egregious, quite frankly. And as the Commissioner notes, in the event the other statute permits collection, use, or disclosure, regardless of whether this is necessary to carry out its purposes, there may still be a conflict. And she goes on to include the example of applicants providing a criminal record check, a police information check, or a vulnerable sector search, which many volunteers have to do these days, all of which may contain more information that is reasonable for the purpose for which the information is collected. And the Commissioner then goes on to state, once the Act is enacted without this provision, it cannot provide the same privacy protection as the FOIP Act did. This is a problem because then it means it isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing. Another reason for my support of this amendment, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that it fails to tackle one of the most pressing privacy challenges of our time, and that's emerging technologies like artificial intelligence. AI is already being used to make decisions that affect individuals' lives, from healthcare to public services. But this bill, Bill 33, lacks any provisions to address transparency, accountability, or safeguards around AI and automated decision-making. In jurisdictions like the European Union, the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, unlike this Act, sets clear standards which require organizations to disclose when automated systems are used. They are mandated to explain decision-making processes and provide recourse for affected individuals. And interestingly enough, when I Googled European Union, the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, it was, of course, Google's AI overview that popped up first, which I suspect is a wee bit of a lesson there. AI is everywhere, and we need to be protected from it. The GDPR is comprehensive because it focuses on a number of principles that should be surrounding data protection, things like lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. On data security, it looks at the implementation of appropriate technical and organizational members regarding how that handling of data happens. And if there's a data breach, there is a whole 72 hours, 3 days, to tell the data subjects that this happened, or the organization will be facing penalties. On data protection by design and by default, there's a mandate by virtue of the European Union's legislation to consider data protection everywhere and anywhere. This again is that precautionary principle at play, Mr. Speaker. In terms of when to process data, they talk about what actual consent from a data subject means. They say, not ambiguously at all, that consent must be freely given, specific, informed, and unambiguous. It also includes sections on data protection officers and people's privacy rights, and quite frankly, it's much more comprehensive than the bill we have before us. Our bill, this Bill 33, leaves Albertans vulnerable to what are opaque and somewhat unregulated systems. And this omission isn't just a missed opportunity, it's a failure to protect Albertans from risks which are indeed foreseeable. We should be planning for them. Finally, Mr. Speaker, in terms of my support for the Hoist Amendment, privacy protections are only as effective as the mechanisms that enforce them. But Bill 33 significantly weakens that oversight. It largely leaves privacy management programs and impact assessments to the discretion of public bodies. The Commissioner, who should be that cornerstone, that person that all of these bodies look to as the person of independent accountability, is not empowered to proactively audit compliance or to even ensure that public bodies meet their obligations. This undermines public trust, and Albertans deserve to know that there is indeed an independent officer who's actively safeguarding their rights. with its vague standard for breach reporting, requiring notification only when a reasonable person determines there's a risk of significant harm. There are inconsistencies, there are loopholes. Privacy is not a privilege, it's a right that happens to be enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It is fundamental to a functioning democracy and trust in all of our public institutions. And Bill 33 in this current form does not at all meet this standard. Albertans deserve privacy protections they can trust. They deserve to know when their information is compromised. They deserve to have confidence in how their data is used and to be assured that independent oversight is in place. Bill 33 delivers none of these. And for all of these reasons, Mr. Speaker, this is why I am supportive of the Hoist Amendment and why I would encourage all of my colleagues to be supportive of it as well. This legislation is a missed opportunity. It's an attempt at privacy protection, but it ultimately weakens it. I urge everyone to support this amendment. I urge the government to take the time it needs to review the legislation, to review the clauses in this bill. We shouldn't be settling for mediocrity when the stakes are so high. We need to make sure Albertans' privacy is genuinely protected. Thank you.
Honourable members, on the amendment, is there anyone else wishing to join in the debate? Seeing none, I am prepared to call the question. Honourable members, on amendment HA1, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. In my opinion, the noes have it. That motion is defeated. Honourable members, pursuant to the Hoist Amendment, I am required to put all questions before the Assembly to dispose of second reading. On second reading of the bill, that is correct. For clarity, for your sake, after a Hoist Amendment, all questions to dispose of second reading are required by the Speaker to put to the Assembly. As such, I will now put second reading. Hypothetically, if you would like a division on second reading, you're still able to do that following me calling the question. On second reading of Bill 33, Protection of Privacy Act, all those in favor of second reading, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. In my opinion, the ayes have it. That motion is carried and so ordered. And a division has been called. Call in the members.
Sorry, you're kind of lulling us to sleep.
Honourable members, a division has been called on second reading of Bill 31. Whatever. On Bill 33. Very sure. All those in favour of the motion, please rise.
Honourable Mr. Guthrie, Honourable Mr. Nicolaides, Honourable Ms. Schultz, Honourable Mr. Williams, Honourable Mr. Glubish, Honourable Minister LaGrange, Honourable Mr. Horner, Honourable Mr. Scow, Honourable Mr. Ellis, Honourable Mr. Amory, Honourable Mr. Newdorf, Honourable Mr. Lowen, Honourable Mr. Wilson, Honourable Mr. Jean, Honourable Mr. Dreeshen, Honourable Mr. Nixon, Mr. Long, Mr. Rosewell, Honourable Mr. Turton, Honourable Mr. Yassine, Honourable Mr. McIver, Honourable Ms. Furr, Honourable Mrs. Sani, Mr. Getson, Honourable Mr. Sigurdsson, Honourable Mr. Nally, Honourable Mr. Hunter, Mr. Yao, Mr. Wright, Mr. Van Dyken, Ms. Pitt, Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Sear, Mr. Lunty, Mr. Weeb, Mr. Boychenko, Mr. McDougall, Mrs. Petrovic, Mr. Dick, Honourable Ms. Armstrong-Hominick, Ms. de Jong, Mr. Sinclair, Mr. Bouchard, Mr. Singh, Ms. Lovely.
Just one section. All those opposed to second reading of Bill 33, please rise.
Ms. Algenade, Honourable Member Hoffman, Honourable Mr. Egan, Member El Maligi, Mr. Shepherd, Ms. Wright, Member Kayande, Member Batten, Member Irwin, Member Beaupre, Mr. Deal, Member Loyola, Dr. Metz.
Mr. Speaker, total for the motion 45, total against 13.
Motion is carried and so ordered.
Bill 33, Protection of Privacy Act, is now read a second time. Under Government Bills and Orders for second reading, Bill 36, Miscellaneous Statutes Amendment Act 2024. Honourable Mr. Scow.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, it is I, and I am so pleased to rise. This evening and move second reading of Bill 36, the Miscellaneous Statutes Amendment Act 2024. How do I mess that up? I mean, honestly, it's right on the paper. It's a big word, multisyllabic. This act, like all Miscellaneous Statutes Amendment Acts, improves clarity across our laws and is how we correct anomalies, inconsistencies, outdated terminology, and errors to provide precision in provincial law. Mr. Speaker, this bill would make minor amendments to 19 acts, which are as follows: an act to end predatory lending, the Consumer Protection Act, Employment Standards Code, Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act, Fair Registration Practices Act, Gambling, Liquor and Cannabis Act, Guarantees Acknowledgement Act, Insurance Act, Labor Mobility Act, Labor Relations Code, Municipal Government Act, Municipal Statutes Amendment Act 2024, Personal Directives Act, Post-Secondary Learning Act, Powers of Attorney Act, Red Tape Reduction Act, Red Tape Reduction Statutes Amendment Act 2024, Teaching Professions Act, and the Wills and Successions Act. Mr. Speaker, as per custom, the official opposition has been consulted on this bill, and I therefore recommend that all members in this chamber swiftly pass second reading of Bill 36. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton, Highlands, Norwood has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise, and I do have a lengthy speech prepared on Bill 36, the Miscellaneous Statutes Amendment Act. Thank you for listening, Minister. Through you, of course, Speaker. No, you know, it is rare that I get to rise in this House and say that we fully support a bill. Haven't got to say that too often. So we appreciate the government consulting with us on this bill, and we appreciate the work they've done to update those statutes. And with that, I urge all members of this House to support Bill 36.
Honourable members, are there others? Seeing and hearing none, I am prepared to call on the Minister to close debate.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it feels like it's been a lifetime since I rose in this chamber to speak on such an important piece of legislation, but suffice to say, I support it. It sounds like the members opposite support it. That's what you call getting it done here, Mr. Speaker, for Albertans, and thank you for their cooperation in second reading of this bill. And with that, I close debate.
Honourable members, the Government House Leader has moved Bill 36, the Miscellaneous Statutes Amendment Act. All those in favour of the motion for second reading, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. In my opinion, the ayes have it. That motion is carried and so ordered.
Bill 36, Miscellaneous Statutes Amendment Act 2024 is now read a second time. Committee of the Whole.
To order, Committee of the Whole has under consideration Bill 34, the Minister of Access to Information Act. Are there any comments, questions, or amendments to be offered with respect to this bill? The member from Edmonton City Centre has risen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to rise and speak to Bill 34, the Access to Information Act. You know, Mr. Speaker, it was just about a year ago when I was still acting for the Criticus for Health when I was asked to do a year-end interview with the Edmonton Journal. And they were asking me for my thoughts on the current state of the healthcare system at that time. They had arranged an interview with the Minister of Health that was supposed to be extensive, ended up being incredibly brief. So they reached out to me to have a bit of a discussion and sort of get what my thoughts were on things. And one of the comments I made, Mr. Chair, at that time as we were looking at, again, a massive increase in pressures due to respiratory virus season and a significant failure of the government to prepare for that. Noting that so little information was getting out to the public at that time, the only reason we were hearing anything was not because the government was telling the public anything, but because we were hearing it from healthcare workers themselves. The comment I made to the Edmonton Journal then, Mr. Chair, was that they're building fortress, last name of the Premier, they're on the inside and everybody else is out. This could be an unprecedented era in Alberta politics. And indeed, that is what we have seen consistently under this government, Mr. Chair. A government that is building walls to keep Albertans out, to prevent them from knowing what their government is doing, what the implications of those decisions are, even, Mr. Chair, simply what Albertans are actually saying to government. And what we have in Bill 34, Mr. Chair, is the government ramping it up even further. Destroying the freedom of information system here in the province of Alberta, making it incredibly more difficult for anyone to get any information about what the government is doing, how they are planning it, anything from this government, Mr. Chair. Now, I spoke earlier this evening on Bill 31, the changes to the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act, and I talked extensively about how this is a government that consistently likes to change legislation, move legislation to benefit themselves politically at cost to Albertans. And that is, again, what we are seeing in Bill 34. This is a defensive maneuver from the government that is going to make it far harder for people to get information, for the system to take far longer, and making that when we do actually receive information, it will be far more heavily redacted. The Information and Privacy Commissioner, whose job it is to oversee this legislation and to speak out on behalf of Albertans, has spoken out extensively against many of the measures in Bill 34. Even as she is in the process of concluding a significant investigation into this government's abuse of the Freedom of Information system. An investigation that was begun last year, that we heard the last update this past August, that it would conclude at the end of December. Now, Mr. Chair, you would think that if a government was actually concerned about creating a better environment for Albertans, they would wait for the results of such an extensive investigation that spans across all ministries in the government, Mr. Chair. Investigating concerns that were brought forward by multiple Albertans, by reporters, by the media, that this government is currently using the rules that currently exist, that they are now amending through Bill 34, to deny information to Albertans, consistently, repeatedly. Indeed, Mr. Chair, we know that, for example, this government will not even release, has repeatedly refused to release simple survey data, surveys that were paid for by Alberta taxpayers, that merely contain the opinions of Albertans on this government's attempt to replace the Canada Pension Plan with an Alberta Pension Plan. This government refuses to release that information to Albertans. They don't think Albertans deserve to hear what Albertans said to the government in a survey that Albertans paid for. Bill 34 is here to codify that further. Again, to show this government's contempt and disregard for Albertans. This government, Mr. Chair, it's my understanding, they don't even publish the simplest of documents anymore, a document called a What We Heard document. Mr. Chair, government engages in all kinds of consultations, as it should. Because when you're making changes that affect Albertans in many significant ways, you should, in fact, be talking to Albertans about it. Now, we know from past practice, and many, many examples, this is a government that does the least in actually talking to Albertans. This is a government, again, that likes to try to set out what it wants to be said, what it wants to hear before they even start talking to Albertans, so they very carefully cherry pick. But the fact is, Mr. Chair, at least previous governments, when they went out and did consultation with Albertans, they would then actually publish what they heard. Imagine that, Mr. Chair, such a simple thing. Such a reasonable thing from any government that actually wanted to engage with Albertans, that was actually pursuing public policy for the public good. But it's my understanding, Mr. Chair, this government doesn't do that anymore. They're not interested in telling Albertans what they heard from Albertans because, again, Mr. Chair, they're not actually consulting with Albertans. So often, Mr. Chair, unfortunately, what this government says it is doing is not, in fact, what it is doing. Why it says it's doing it is not why they're actually doing it. And so the changes in Bill 34 are intended to make sure no one ever actually finds out what their actual objectives are and what they're actually attempting to do. This is, I think, Mr. Chair, probably easily the least transparent government Albertans have ever had. The most disingenuous. And these changes that they are making to privacy laws and the Freedom of Information system in the province of Alberta proves it. So, Mr. Chair, in an attempt to mitigate the damage and try to make a bad bill perhaps a little better, I have an amendment I'd like to propose.
Receives copies and will proceed from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you wait for that to reach you?
From Edmonton City Centre can proceed. We will refer to this as Amendment A1.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, the amendment states, my colleague, the member from Calgary, Boulard-McCall, to move that Bill 34, Access to Information Act, be amended as follows in Section 4 by striking out subsections 1W and 7, B in Section 56A, by striking out section 4(1)(a), T, or W, and substituting section 4(1)(a) or T, C, and section 97(1) by striking out clause A. Now, I recognize, Mr. Chair, by my reading that into the record, it's abundantly clear what we're attempting to do, but nonetheless, I will explain it again. Essentially, Mr. Chair, Bill 34 is expanding the definition of cabinet confidentiality. Now, Mr. Chair, what we have seen repeatedly, and to my understanding, part of the current investigation, this widespread investigation spanning across all ministries of this government, is in good part about this government, I would say, stretching, if not abusing, the concept of cabinet confidentiality. Looking for any excuse to declare that something is confidential advice that was given to cabinet, for example, a simple survey of Albertans telling this government what they thought of their plan to pull us out of the CPP and create an APP. They're refusing to release that, saying that is confidential advice given to cabinet. So we've already seen, Mr. Chair, that this is a concept this government likes to abuse. Now they want to go even further. They want to actually codify it. So in Bill 34, they are looking to expand the definition of cabinet confidentiality to include messages between and from a minister to a political staffer and vice versa. So right now, political staff are not included, Mr. Chair, which is why on many occasions Albertans have been able to find out about concerning things the government has been doing because somebody forked the information and they were able to get some emails that were sent between political staff that revealed things that the government was doing, that the government didn't want us to know. But because media have done their due diligence, or others have, or the official opposition, Albertans have been informed, and sometimes we've been able to head off bad decisions, we've been able to prevent corruption, or at the very least, Albertans have been informed about the depths to which a government has been willing to sink. This government now wants to change that, Mr. Chair, to ensure that no one is able to get that information again, to ensure that when political staff are communicating with each other or communicating with government, that information is all of a sudden redacted, privileged, not available. Now, here's the thing, Mr. Chair. They don't actually define what political staff means. So they're creating a whole new category in this legislation to avoid releasing information to the public, and they're not defining what that category means. So, Mr. Chair, this government does not have the guts to actually define this in the legislation out in the open. They insist that they want to make this definition behind closed doors, in the cabinet room. They don't want it to have the scrutiny of the opposition. They do not want to have it debated. That is concerning, Mr. Chair, for a government that, again, is one of the least transparent that we have ever had, that is currently under investigation by the Information and Privacy Commissioner for abusing, in my view, the information and privacy system, the Freedom of Information system. So this amendment is deleting that. It's removing that caveat. If the government doesn't want to define what it is, if the government doesn't want to be transparent with Albertans about why it feels it needs to do this and who it wants to afford this privilege to, then, Mr. Chair, I say they shouldn't do it. So this amendment removes that section. It will remove the exemption for records of communication between political staff and between political staff and members of Executive Council. Now, indeed, the Information and Privacy Commissioner has raised concerns about this particular clause. Now, about Bill 34 as a whole, she said, in general, my view is that there are many grounds for concern regarding Bill 34's impact on Albertans' access to information rights. Rights, Mr. Chair. Something this government claims to be very proud of, protective of, brought in an entire act to amend particular rights here in the province of Alberta. Albertans' right to this information, Mr. Chair, The Information and Privacy Commissioner says, Bill 34's impact on Albertans' access to information rights and more generally the functioning of the access to information system in Alberta, there's many grounds for concern of how those are going to be impacted by Bill 34. She warns that sections 4(1)T, UV, the ones that we were talking about here, combined with sections 27 and 29, create some of the broadest exceptions to executive-level government transparency compared to similar Canadian or international legislation. Now, the Minister of Justice was just up here a little bit ago, Mr. Chair, saying how important it was to him to make sure our Electoral Boundaries Commission was in what he felt alignment with other jurisdictions. Only the best for Alberta, Mr. Chair, except when it comes to being able to get the information on how that minister is making his decisions, or his colleagues in cabinet. In that case, they feel that Alberta should offer the least information of any jurisdiction in Canada, should have the broadest exception, that Albertans should be most in the dark out of any other citizens in this country. That is the warning that is coming forward from the Information and Privacy Commissioner. See, the way it works, Mr. Chair, is ministers are the head of a department. Political staff serve a public purpose. They perform public interest functions. By exempting those political staff, this section exempts a broad class, a massive amount of government documents, not just policy deliberations, as is commonly the case under most Canadian access laws, but far broader, that no one will be allowed to see or look at or read, that relate to decisions that involve Albertans, that directly impact Albertans, even information that has been paid for by Albertans. Again, Mr. Chair, that is the level of contempt with which this government holds Albertans. They do not think Albertans deserve to know, not even what Albertans have told the government. They want to control the narrative, Mr. Chair, on every front they possibly can, because they know if Albertans truly knew half of what they were doing, the motivations for why they're actually doing it, if that information, those documents were actually accessible, Albertans would not be big fans of this government, as indeed many currently are. So again, Mr. Chair, this is a government that is afraid to actually be honest with Albertans, because they know they can't carry support if they are. So that is why we have Bill 34 in front of us, where they are creating the most sweeping, broad exceptions in all of Canada. And that is why I've brought forward this amendment to remove at least one portion of that, to hopefully, in at least one respect, keep this government a little more honest, to try to bring back a modicum more transparency on behalf of the people of Alberta, from a government that arrogantly seems to feel they should have none. And the concern is that this exemption that they have put in, that this amendment would remove, has the potential to improperly extend access requirement exemptions to the public service. So again, Mr. Chair, we're talking about the ministers and the actual cabinet, and so yeah, their deliberations are private. They want to extend that now to all of their political staff so that no one can get any information about that. But this has the potential, Mr. Chair, to go even beyond that to the actual public service. Actual individuals who are paid for by Albertans, who act in service of Albertans, who are not there for the political and partisan interests of this government. But the changes this government is making is to try to even muzzle them. And certainly, Mr. Chair, we have heard from many public servants, we have seen this across the healthcare system, many other respects. This is the most controlling, most vindictive government we have ever seen in this province, when it comes to the ability of public servants to be able to speak about the real challenges and the issues that they're seeing. And so with this change in Bill 34, this particular change here that this amendment is looking to remove, we are working to try to rein that in. You know, most access to information legislation, it primarily just focuses on the type of records, specific, narrowly defined processes that should be exempt, not on the people. So the idea is, Mr. Chair, it's not that certain people never have to disclose anything they have said or done. on the taxpayer dime, but that there are particular classes of documents or particular processes that need to be protected, like, yes, cabinet deliberations. What the government is proposing to do here is entirely new, exempting political staff, focusing on exempting people, rather than a record or a process, saying that nothing this individual says or does should be transparent to Albertans. It's highly concerning. The provision is broad, it is vague, and it will, Mr. Chair, significantly degrade the transparency and the openness of this government and of the departments of the government of Alberta. And that is the opinion not just of the official opposition, that is the opinion of the Information and Privacy Commissioner, who is the expert in privacy legislation, and whom this government did not consult on this legislation, to be clear, Mr. Chair. They talked to her beforehand, made some vague suggestions, and then she didn't see anything until the bill came out, which has been the pattern with this government. That is how they've generally operated with that office. So I think Albertans should be very concerned, and that is why I've brought forward this amendment, Mr. Chair. And I would hope that this government might find a semblance of a conscience in walking back this portion, at least, of Bill 34. Make this bad bill a little better. Show a little bit more respect for Albertans and support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, member. Are there others wishing to speak? The Minister for Service Alberta and Red Tape Reduction has risen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have another thoughtful amendment from Calgary Bueller McCall. The amendment says Calgary Bueller McCall, but City Centre presented it. Mr. Speaker, if I was City Centre, I'd let Bueller McCall take credit for this one. It's not very well thought out and certainly not very accurate, so I just wanted to stand up and just provide a little bit of insight into this. To be very clear, Mr. Speaker, we are not expanding the definition of cabinet confidentiality. We are not all of a sudden adding political staff to it. Political staff have always been protected, but it wasn't clear in the legislation. So, Mr. Speaker, we are providing the clarity that is lacking. And I want to be very clear for the opposition, just so that they know, access to information is about access to government documents, not political conversations. And not only that, but in fact, Mr. Speaker, these amendments that we're proposing are in line with what the Supreme Court of Canada said is consistent with good governance. Now, last week in question period, I introduced everyone here to a game that I call a trip down memory lane. And it's a game I can play all day, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to go into the second round. I'm just going to talk about what we brought in last week, which was the fact that it was the members opposite in 2017, and we know this because of a leaked Justice email, that the minister at the time was demanding to know the names of individuals and groups putting in FOIP requests. Mr. Speaker, on what level is this appropriate? On what level is this good governance? In fact, it's not, Mr. Speaker. And I would argue that it was the lack of clarity in the FOIP laws that led them to behave so badly, and some misguidance and lack of ethical issues and other things. But, Mr. Speaker, the fact is we are providing the clarity to the FOIP laws that are currently missing so that 44 years from now, heaven forbid, that Alberta ends up with another accidental government called the NDP, then I want to know that they're not going to be able to behave in the same way that that caucus did in 2017, because that is not consistent with good governance, Mr. Speaker. So I want to be clear, we are simply modernizing and updating our FOIP laws, and we are simply updating and modernizing outdated and aging amendments. And in doing so, Mr. Speaker, we are aligning ourselves along jurisdictional lines so that our FOIP laws reflect the other provinces in the country, including the federal government. Now, every province has FOIP laws that are slightly different, but at the end of the day, there is no light between any of us when it comes to providing access to government documents to its citizens. That's what these amendments do, Mr. Speaker. They update aging legislation. They provide clarity. Now, The last comment that I'll make is the member misspoke. The honourable member thought that we didn't engage with the OIPC, but in fact that wasn't correct. I would agree with him if I thought he was correct, but he's not correct, Mr. Speaker. We in fact did engage with the OIPC. Technology and Innovation, as well as Service Alberta, both engaged with the OIPC, and I myself also had a meeting with the OIPC as well. So we had full engagement with the OIPC. We continue to engage with her. In fact, we're aware that she's asking for more clarity, and so we have committed to continue to engage with the OIPC as we build out these regulations and hopefully provide that clarity that the OIPC is looking for. So because of that, I'm asking all members of this House to turn down this amendment. It does not bring any value to the legislation, and in fact, it risks pushing us back to 2017, and that's not an area that we want to go. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask that everybody turn this down.
Are there any other speakers on Amendment A1? Seeing none, on Amendment A1 as proposed by the member from Edmonton City Centre on behalf of Calgary Boulevard McCall, are you agreed? Any opposed? That amendment is defeated. Members, we are back on the main motion. The member for Airdrie East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have an amendment to move.
Amendment will be referred to as A2. The member for Airdrie East can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Bill 34, the Access to Information Act, be amended in Section 50, Sub 6, Sub A by striking out Section 4, Sub 1, Sub A, Sub T or W, and substituting Section 4, Sub A, Sub 1, Sub S, Sub T, or Sub W. Mr. Speaker, I think this amendment is very straightforward. It clearly says it's going to do what it says it's going to do. I think it's an important addition to this legislation, and I urge all members to vote in favour of Amendment A2. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? The member for, or the Minister for Service Alberta and Red Tape Reduction.
Mr. Speaker, I would just like to say now that's a well thought out amendment. And I would encourage the members opposite to perhaps take the amendment home and study it and frame it and maybe come back with some other well thought out amendments on their own. But as far as this amendment goes, Mr. Speaker, I ask that everybody support it.
Awesome. Well said.
On Amendment A2, any other speakers? Seeing none, on Amendment A2 as proposed by the member for Airdrie East, are you agreed? Any opposed? No. That amendment is carried. We're back on the bill. Bill 34. Any further speakers? The member for Edmonton Meadows has risen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to rise and add my comments to Bill 34. Access to Information Act. Mr. Chair, the changes actually updating was required to the POIP Act and was actually due for quite long. And what we see in this bill in hand right now, nobody actually really expected to see that will be discussed in this House in the drill that called updating and strengthening the POIP Act. There has been grave concerns to the existing POIP Act in relation to being access the information related to mostly the government business. I'll go through the challenges and the issues reported by very reputable bodies who are dependent on the POIP Act in relation to provide information to the Albertans so the people of Alberta can make decision based on the information, the true information that is, so they can make informed decision on the things they feel they are important to them. The POIP is crucial feature to democracy to promote state level transparency and accountability. And what we see in this bill that the existing act had the flexibilities and efficiency that existing bill act provided. It basically, the government actually, I don't know who did they discuss with and consulted it a bit, came out actually making it much more harder for in the future for anybody who wanted to use, who wanted to see exactly what is happening in the government operations and assess the decision making and then they provide their feedback based on that. So the way this act has been drafted, the government actually going too far. Now, it can be interpreted, number of actually sections in this bill, and you look into this, can be interpreted like government is not even interested anymore in releasing the information to the public, to the very Albertans. They are being impacted, and all those people, they are working for the benefit of the people at large. And that is their professional, that's their professions. That is the job they have took on and getting paid for. They wanted to do justice with their job. So their work, if this act passes as it is, their work will be interrupted. They will not be able to do their job. The past two privacy commissioners, Alberta Privacy Commissioner Diane McLeod and one of the other individual, I think she was Jill Clayton. They actually they shared their concern with this act and proposed so many recommendations to strengthen the act so that will help those people who rely on the information and use for the public benefit. And what we see, instead of taking on that professional advice, the government has come up with some sort of decision that is basically looking like to protect themselves by hiding the information that is the crucial and critical part of democratic process. In 2023, the Edmonton Journal reported, and they said, Alberta already had one of the most restrictive information regimes in Canada. And before that, there was an investigation launched by the Alberta Privacy Commissioner, Diane McLeod. So this was followed from the reporting from the Narwhal and Globe and the Mail indicating government departments were failing to follow public disclosure laws. And Alberta was found to be the only province to refuse to respond to a routine information request from the Globe and Mail. The investigation was extended but could conclude by the end of 2024. McLeod in 2023, she submitted, it has never been more important for a Canadian to have access to official government records. So, Mr. Chair, this government is claiming that this legislation will increase access to information, but the large list of exemptions in this act proves that this bill will do exactly the opposite to the government claim. As an example, the change from 30 calendar days to 30 business days standardize a longer wait time. That was one of the concerns. So instead of addressing the 30-day wait period time, the government has actually further lengthening the waiting time to almost a month and a half. So in this case, rather than addressing the delays, this act is further lengthening the timelines that there is more time to process requests. So that's not actually in line with the mandate of submission of recommendations from the Privacy Commissioner at all. So this is going to negatively affect the existing act. A new section 7.3 will require requests to include enough details for the records to be found within a reasonable time, with reasonable effort. But guess what? The problem is that nobody knows what the reasonable time and reasonable efforts are. This bill is totally silent about that. And there are a number of other sections in this bill that contradicts government claiming that the government is actually moving in a better direction. So the concerns are shown by the stakeholders, the people who has been using the POIP Act to get the information to complete their work and or on behalf of Albertans to do their job to benefit of the community or benefit of all Albertans. They're all concerned about this bill. There have been many sections. They are making the bill actually the act actually much worse than we had in the past. So I strongly oppose this bill, and I also ask my colleagues on both sides of the aisles to oppose this bill and request this government to go back to the table and look at all those recommendations from the professionals and come up with a new act that not only opposition and all House members can support it, but the Albertans can benefit from this as well. So with this, I also move motion to adjourn the debate. Mr. Chair, thank you.
The committee to rise and report progress. Having heard the motion from the member from Edmonton Meadows to rise and report progress on Bill 34, are you agreed? Agreed. Any opposed? That is carried.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Committee of the Whole has had under consideration certain bills. The committee reports progress on the following bills. Bill 34. Mr. Speaker, I wish to table copies of all the amendments considered by the Committee of the Whole on this date for the official records of the Assembly.
Does the Assembly concur in the report? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Please say no. That is carried. Deputy Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, wonderful work, members of the legislature. However, it is late. I move that the Assembly be adjourned until 1:30 p.m. on Tuesday, December 3rd.
All members agree to the motion by Deputy Government House Leader to adjourn till 1:30 tomorrow. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. That motion is carried.